Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle are looking to bounce back after a rough season, dealing with another long absence from their quarterback. We discuss the top 3 storylines for the Miami Dolphins entering 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
We are going to hit on the top 3 storylines for the Miami Dolphins entering this season. And of course, the biggest storyline will always be, can Tua Tagovailoa stay healthy, right? Because that affects everyone else, especially Tyreek Hill and De'Von Achane. We will discuss that. But and just in general, Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle both had a really down year, really bad year for Waddle in particular. Wide receiver 53 in average scoring. And it's been quite a long time since we've seen him be a top 10 wide receiver. While Tyreek Hill was the wide receiver 1 just 2 years ago in 2023, wide receiver 3 in 2022, but fell all the way to wide receiver 35 on average this last season. So let's talk about these two. Do we think they will rebound? Right now, Tyreek Hill is sitting as a wide receiver 15 in consensus rankings, and Jaylen Waddle at the wide receiver 28. Do you think these ranks are fair? Is there one guy that you prefer their value over the other?
Well, we did have some breaking news that might change some of this that we were thinking about. Good timing, by the way, for us to do the Dolphins show and for the Dolphins to make a trade. So we saw the Jalen Ramsey trade come across. Okay, that made a lot of sense. The Steelers needed a corner. Then we saw Minkah Fitzpatrick was going the other way. Okay, we can look at that. Nothing too much for fantasy. And then we look at Jonnu Smith going, and we think, wait, Jonnu Smith changed teams? What happened here? Why is this fantasy relevant? But I don't know if people realized his ridiculous season last year. 111 targets, 88 receptions, 8 touchdowns for the Dolphins. He just had a year out of nowhere, and it all came kind of the second half. There was that one game where they were going scoreless, and Jonnu scored at the end. So he was just having a magical year, one of the special years for a tight end out of nowhere. And now he's gone, and that's it. So they didn't need him, I guess, going forward. And that's interesting because now does this signal that they want to open up the passing game again? It was very compressed last year after Tua came back from the head injury issue and just in general being careful, Mike McDaniel with him. So you had a lot of checkdowns to Jonnu Smith. You had a lot of passes to De'Von Achane. Jaylen Waddle was kind of forgotten in that mix, and he really fell down here. And Tyreek Hill, of course, when they're not stretching the field, making big plays, having that same timing hit on those kind of motion plays where he's in the quick step to get downfield. When those are not happening, you're not going to get the results you're looking for. And look, for Tyreek Hill to finish with wide receiver 15 in the way they were calling plays in this offense, it's kind of a minor miracle with all the quarterback changes and Tua being hurt. I mean, that was actually good based on just like the support not being all that great, right? So he finished just outside the top 12. That's credit to how great Tyreek Hill is. So I think he's a guy that rebounds. I wouldn't worry too much about the 30-year-old issue. I think he's a guy that I like that, right? You can get Tyreek Hill at wide receiver 15 right now after wide receiver 35. I mean, this is a pretty decent ranking for him. I mean, 35, again, looking at that, I mean, there's so many factors that were not in Tyreek Hill's spot here, but putting him at 15 kind of restores the confidence that we have here. And looking at Jaylen Waddle, he's 28. I mean, I would actually feel comfortable about both of these spots because I think Tyreek bounces back into the top 12. I think you see Jaylen Waddle probably having value as a wide receiver 2 right now. And again, you can't discount the 111 vacated targets. I know they added Nick Westbrook-Akine, but he was basically the third receiver. And he wasn't a big target guy in Tennessee. He had some flashes, but that was because of his scoring. He's not going to really compete with either of these guys for the key targets downfield. Now, he's going to absorb some of what Jonnu Smith had, but so will Waddle, Achane, and Hill, right? So it'll be distributed well here. So I think this is the best value you can get almost anywhere here because you're going bargain basement with two receivers who have proved they have the talent to do this, Michelle. So I'm excited to jump on it again. I think just looking at wide receiver 15, I mean, that kind of says we're not totally down on him, and Hill is going to rebound big time.
Yeah, I will say, just to clarify here, Tyreek Hill actually finishes wide receiver 21 overall, and then wide receiver 35 on average. So it was a really,
okay.
I mean, yeah, especially because he was, some people were taking him first, second, third overall last year. He's so high after his insane 2023 season when he had 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns. I don't think he's done. I still think there's plenty left in the tank. I think last year was just a disaster of a year for the Dolphins in general. I think it's great they got rid of Jonnu Smith. Like, they were leaning on him too much in the second of the season. And, Tua missed a chunk of time again with the concussions. That's what you always have to worry about when you're drafting these guys. But, I mean, last year, Hill only averaged 10.5 points per game last season. That was after averaging 19.8 in 2023. But in the 5 games, he got at least 8 targets from Tua. He averaged 17.7 points per game. So, like, he was right there at when he had his quarterback and was actually getting his workload. He was doing what Tyreek Hill always does. And we have to remember he was playing through a wrist injury all last year, underwent surgery after the season, apparently was also dealing with an ankle injury. But I still think he has time left in him. He's 30 years old. I still think that he has another good year or two. So I'm fine with this wide receiver 15 rank right now. It's between Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. That's where he's going. Would you rather go with Garrett Wilson or Tyreek Hill?
I think I would go Tyreek Hill. I mean, again, when I looked at the numbers here, I mean, 81 for 959 and 6. This is only a bad year if your name is Tyreek Hill, right? This is still a very good year. If you told somebody else your quarterback situation is going to be atrocious, you're going to throw a lot to the tight end and still end up with these numbers. Again, that 35 average, I mean, yeah, that's not what you're looking for, but I think you make a very good point with the injury. Like, he wasn't 100% himself. So when you don't have the right quarterback situation, when you're struggling with health, it wasn't like he was slowing down, right? When you look at 81 for 959, that's still a healthy speed type number here, right? He's still making big plays to get to that point. So I do like Tyreek to rebound. And again, he just has a little bit more upside. He definitely has more upside than Garrett Wilson. Adams is getting interesting, right? Because of where he's at with the Rams and playing against Puka Nacua. So that might be a tougher debate actually for me because of the touchdowns that Adams can score over Hill, where I think Hill over Wilson is an easy choice for me.
Yeah, I think Hill over Adams is actually a super easy choice for me, and Hill with Wilson. But I still agree. I think I'd go with Tyreek Hill. We will be hitting on Garrett Wilson because we'll be doing a Jets episode later this week. The biggest worry there is also quarterback with Justin Fields, but we've seen Fields, target DJ Moore like crazy, so maybe it can happen. But right now, among this group, I'm leaning Tyreek Hill. With Jaylen Waddle, it's so hard because we saw his first 2 years in the league cool, right? 2021 and 2022, especially that 2022 season when his yards per reception were incredibly high at 18 yards per reception. He finished as a wide receiver 7 overall that year. He had 8 touchdowns. Since then, though, I mean, he has 6 total touchdowns over the last 2 years. He deals with injuries nonstop. And 3 out of his 4 years, I mean, it's 1,015 yards, 1,014 yards, 744 yards. I know there's, missed a couple of games last year, but like, I just don't really care about that guy who's going to get 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, it's just not the upside I'm really looking for. Now, maybe with Jonnu Smith gone Jonnu Smith had the most receptions on this team last year. So maybe that bumps up Jaylen Waddle this year. I just don't think his wide receiver 28 price is low enough for what he has shown us lately. I mean, when you can get a Devonta Smith right near him, or Jameson Williams, who I just think he has bigger game potential and just a bigger ceiling for next year, or even Xavier Worthy. I don't think I'm going to pull the trigger on Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, it's not super exciting, but I think if you're in a PPR league, you might lean a lot more toward him than you'd be in any other league because definitely the targets are there, the short area, what he excelled at. He kind of had a weird career because he used to be kind of the extended handoff, throw to guy in short area and had a very low yards per catch. And we seem to have a very high yards per catch. And the Tyreek Hill thing has been kind of up and down here with his production. So I don't know. I mean, Tyreek Hill has definitely replaced a lot of the key targets that Waddle was getting to stretch the field. So that is still a factor. Maybe you need to have Hill slow down a bit for Waddle to accelerate here. Yeah. I just look at that wide receiver 28 again. I think he does not have a lot of upside. I'll say that. He might have a higher floor than some of the people there because of his usage now with no Smith. But I think it's a debate here that you look at Hill versus those other guys. Hill, we know what his ceiling is. He can be wide receiver one totally, right? Waddle, you're not looking for that much above that if you're going to get from wide receiver 28. I think he's, to me, just a little bit undervalued, but I'm still not a person I'm targeting in drafts at all here. I think I'm going to look at a lot of other receivers with upside, but again, if he drops a little bit, I'm going to take Waddle for sure as a kind of a sneaky wide receiver 3.
Let's change topics here and move on to De'Von Achane, who's going right there at the end of the first round or right at the top of the second round, running back 6 off the board. Is he worth it? We'll let you know right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt a lot easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. So you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth for yourself and your family. Really, it's fantastic. When you look at Monarch and you track your spending, you might be surprised how much you're spending on things like food and clothing that you may need to budget for and think about a little bit more. And then we're looking at our financial goals. That's going to help you get there, knowing that you're putting some money aside here, that you're going to work toward a bigger goal and maybe something you have your eye on, like a car or a boat or something like that, that comes with managing your budget better. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get a half off your first year again. That's monarchmoney.com. Manage your money better only with Monarch Money. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show, and we'll look at De'Von Achane. He was a supernova when he came to the league just a couple years ago. Then he kind of started to settle in as a lead back here. We had that ridiculous season from Raheem Mostert a couple years ago, scoring all those touchdowns. But we knew the torch would be passed as Mostert would get older, and we saw that develop. A lot of things doubled here. You saw his 100 carries went up to 200. He had 37 targets. It went up to 87 targets. So a lot of doubling of his usage here. And the scoring was there. RB11 on average, kind of regressed to the mean a little bit because he's RB4 when he went nuts in those few games in 2023. So where does that end with Achane in year 3? We had a ridiculous start, pretty solid year 2. What do we get in year 3, Michelle?
Yeah, I think last year was an important year for him to show us because he has a smaller body frame, right? That he can stay healthy. And he played a full 17 games. He had 281 touches, and he didn't struggle with health any more than any of the workhorse backs around the league, right? And that's what he was last year. Especially, he led all running backs in receiving yards. Over those 2 years that he's been in the NFL, he's a running back 8 on average in scoring, just ahead of Bijan Robinson, by the way, and they both entered at the same time. The only guys that have scored more than him on average since he's entered the league is CMC, Barkley, Kyron Williams, Gibbs, Henry, Derrick Henry, and Jonathan Taylor and Alvin Kamara. Like he's shown us that he is a top tier asset here. I think I am fine with his draft cost, but again, you have to worry about Tua's health because when Tua was there, Achane was amazing. When Tua wasn't there, his performance just went way down. He averaged 19 and a half points per game in half PPR in the 11 games Tua played. That would have, he on the season, he averaged 15.5. And again, in the 11 games, 19 and a half with Tua. He had just one game with fewer than 11 fantasy points with Tua that he played with, only 2 games with fewer than 15 points. And he had at least 17 fantasy points in 8 of the 11 games played with Tua. Nearly 7 targets per game in those 11 games with Tua. Tua's there. He's going to be fantastic. You're going to be holding your breath the whole year, and that's your biggest worry.
Well, now I guess you can feel a little bit better that there might be somebody else other than Tua that could do something. I mean, we don't want to attach it all to our quarterback, sadly, but it was true last year. But now you have some interesting options here between Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers. Would they bench Tua at some point if wasn't effective? We'll see. I mean, he still has a lot of those.
Quinn Ewers. I love him.
He does have a lot of those metrics that are great, like the completion percentage and yards per whatever. But those things don't really tell you the true effectiveness. So Tua, if you looked at him and said, is he really compiling and really playing the way we want? No, we do not like that. So I think they tried to get some options because of that, because they don't want the offense to go in the tank. I don't know why Mike McDaniel couldn't also coach and scheme up plays better when Tua is not in the lineup. It didn't make any sense. Well, I think with Achane, he's a guy that he kind of reminds him of Christian McCaffrey, right? That he kind of was loosely based with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, and that type of connection where you might say, hey, I might have my own version of CMC in this offense, and definitely with the receptions. I mean, you turn into almost 600 yards, and you also score 6 times as a receiver. So that's a pretty big asset to have here out of the backfield. And we talked about Jonnu Smith's vacated targets. I mean, again, these are shorter targets. That's going to help a little bit of Waddle. I think that'll help Achane as well be involved. And we know Jonnu was a pretty good touchdown scorer last year as well. So they're going to have to replace some of that ability. And again, that's going to spread well between Hill, Waddle, and what Achane are doing. The problem, I think, in general with Waddle is that Achane is very similar to him as a receiver. So it's like, who do you throw to? You get the guy in the open field or get the guy that's going to struggle to separate? You're going to throw to Achane. So I'm okay totally with this cost. I mean, he is an explosive player. He can win you weeks. He had 4 big games of more than 25 points last year. And I know Tua a little bit Tua dependent, but the individual talent, we know how explosive this kid is. We know what he did with very limited touches there as a rookie. So he's proved the durability. I think for me, like Kyren Williams is your guy that people are always doubting, he's a smaller, later round pick. This is the guy that I like where we've seen it. He's put up the evidence to say, I can handle the workload. I'm okay. And that workload could only increase, right? I think he could get a few more catches, get him in the open field where he's not taking the hits, and you get a few more carries. I mean, when you have like 203, there's room to go up to 250, somewhere like that, and still be rather manageable for a running back. So, again, I'm really excited. Achane, I think we're going to have to be the centerpiece of this offense, kind of set up everything to get downfield if they want to get that goal of kind of stretching the field like we're used to with this offense.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Achane and CMC are going back to back in drafts, and they both come with their worries, right? Achane's the biggest worry is to his health, and Christian McCaffrey, his biggest worry is his actual health and how much, his attendance, what am I trying to think of right now? Achilles tendonitis. That's what it was. Yeah. Achilles tendonitis. If it will flare back
mash
up.
Up 2 words.
Yes. So who would you rather go with if you were on the board and you got your choice of the 2? Are you taking Achane or CMC?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming at some point because I did compare the 2. I don't know. I'm a young upside guy, so I might take Achane. He might have more upside than McCaffrey. And again, if McCaffrey didn't have like a variety of injuries that slowed him down last year, I might be okay. It's more linear. He's going to come back and bounce back like he has in his time in Carolina or San Francisco. But Achane's a younger, flashier guy that has proved himself. And again, injuries can hit anyone, but I think Achane is going to have to do more now to carry the burden of the Dolphins offense than McCaffrey. I think, look, they might need him a little bit more, but I don't think his role is going to change too much with the wide receiver situation. But with Achane, I think not having Smith is going to be a big thing where they're going to have to get him more involved in the short passing game.
Yeah, I agree with you. So now we have to figure out, if we're saying we're going to trust Tyreek Hill and Achane, and you're going to also trust Waddle, and that means we're going to trust that Tua Tagovailoa can make it through the season. If he can make it through the season, is he worth a draft pick in one quarterback leagues? Because right now he's buried in the rankings, but he was the quarterback 14 on average last year. And he has shown us really good stretches of time of fantasy points. So He's all the way down at quarterback 22. We'll let you know if we're interested in him in one quarterback leagues right after a quick break. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, so Tua is sitting at quarterback 22 in consensus rankings. He's behind guys like C.J. Stroud, Matthew Stafford, J.J. McCarthy, who we haven't even seen play in the NFL yet. And again, Tua last year was a quarterback 14 on average. Really down 2023 season, quarterback 20. And then in 2022, he was a quarterback 10 on average. So I do think maybe quarterback 22 is too low for him. I don't know if I can push him up to saying he deserves to be drafted in one quarterback leagues. But I mean, from when you look at last year, he did have quite a few he missed quite a few games, but he had quite a few good fantasy weeks and a really amazing stretch from weeks 11 through 14, the 4 straight games of great fantasy performances. So I think he has the potential. It's just too many risks, and the rushing upside is just non-existent whatsoever.
Yeah, he's not a runner. He doesn't give you anything there. He's not even all that exciting as a passer. I think he's a bit streaky, right? And he's a little bit big game dependent, where there's some games he can just be atrocious and not give you any points, and it just can be a struggle for this offense to move anywhere. So it's kind of interesting. A few years ago, he led the league, and I was probably conflating a couple of these things, that he led the league in yards per attempt. Last year, it dropped all the way to 7.2. But the trade-off of that is his completion percentage was the highest in the league. It's 72.9. That's a clear indication, right? We were dinking and dunking and going safe passing. We don't want to get Tua hurt. They cannot play that way, right? As much as we want Tua on the field, like for Tua and the receivers to be effective, he's got to play just like, I need to throw the ball downfield, right? Because what's going to happen is defenses are going to say, hey, this offense is looking pretty compressed, and they're going to take away some of that Tyreek Hill stuff downfield. So they got to really push it downfield better. It's going to open up the running game. It's going to open up those shorter passes to Waddle. But I don't know. It's hard to read Mike McDaniel. I would think the Jonnu Smith trade kind of says they feel a little bit more confident, right, that they want to get back to that style of offense, because why would you get rid of a guy that was so valuable to your quarterback as a safety valve, right? I mean, just a throw in a trade, right? Unless Arthur Smith wanted a Jonnu Smith reunion that badly and said, you got to put him in there to make this trade happen. So I don't know. But like that tells me maybe they're tipping their hand to say, we want to throw. We want to use our 11 personnel, get Nick with Westbrook-Akina. You could do a lot worse than a third receiver on a lot of teams. Get him involved and then spread the field and stretch it a little bit. So maybe they have a little bit more confidence in Tua. That's what I'm going to take away. Am I still excited to go after Tua? No. There's just too many guys around that spot and too many guys really above him that are just better to have on your team, whether you're looking at Superflex, TQB leagues, or just even as a backup that you're playing for the right matchups.
Yeah, you just have to lean so much on the passing touchdowns because, I mean, last year he had 49 rushing yards. He missed a handful of games with injury, but the year before that, 74. The year before that, 70 rushing yards. He has 0 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years, and that's not going to change, right? It's not all of a sudden he's going to start running because he can't. I mean, they cannot risk him getting another concussion. He can't be taking off and running. They can't be using him in goal line scenarios where he could get hit in the head. Like, they have to be careful with him. So that's just taking away such a major part of fantasy points for many of these quarterbacks. Now, obviously, I mentioned he's around Stafford and Stroud. They're not going to get a lot of much of anything with rushing either, right? So those are all 3 guys that you have to really depend on passing touchdowns. But, if you had a pick between Stroud, Tua, and Stafford for your quarterback 2, right? Let's say you're in a 2 quarterback league or super flex. Which one do you trust the most to pass the most touchdowns, I guess, this year?
I think it has to be Stafford, just based on Evan Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. Like, Adams himself is a pretty big touchdown scorer. We know that, right? You get him, he's one of the better receivers and getting open in the red zone, in the end zone. So I'd say Stafford is the guy. I mean, that's just the best duo, I think. I mean, no offense to Hill and Waddle. I think that duo is just as dangerous here with Nakua and Adams with the way they can finish drives. So I do like that. CJ Stroud might give you pause because it's like, okay, we got this Nico Collins situation, but things have kind of fallen apart around that second receiver spot. But again, I still feel again that I would take CJ Stroud over Tua. I think I've seen the numbers more recently with Stroud. I don't think he's a total zero in the running game. Like he doesn't run, but he could do a little bit there, just enough to change the narrative on that. But he also has, I think, having Collins is really helpful, right? Just knowing that you have that go-to guy and some other weapons enough where, again, I'm going to trust Stroud because he's done it more recently as a top 12 QB than Tua has.
Yeah, and really right now Tua is sitting there with just Tyreek Hill as like a big time scoring option, while these other guys have other better options there. So yeah, I agree with you. That's going to be it for the top 3 storylines for the Miami Dolphins entering the season. We will be back on tomorrow. Actually, we'll be back with you tomorrow talking about the Buffalo Bills, and we'll get to the Jets and the Patriots to finish up all 32 teams. This is it. It's all we got left to go through all of the top storylines for all 32 teams. So stick with us. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.